All right, we're at 3 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. My name is David Waller. I'm a solutions engineer here at Rollbar. I've led all of the Rollbar Academy sessions thus far, so if you've joined for any of the other ones, you're probably familiar with my style of presenting at least. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar and it will be shared. I believe we have a new Rollbar Academy domain that we'll introduce as well, where we can store these recordings and where you can view them as well. By default, attendees are in listen-only mode. That's just for keeping things quiet. If you do have a question that's better spoken than typed, then we can make time for that. Just raise your hand or drop a note in the chat that you'd like to be unmuted to ask that question. And then for getting your questions in, there's a number of ways you can do that. You can use the chat, the Q&A, or you can do, like I said, you can raise your hand or request to be unmuted. I'm not that picky about how we get the questions. All right, so today's agenda, we'll introduce the terminology. If you have been following along with the other Rollbar sessions, this is probably nothing new. Then we'll talk about the way that we can organize and prioritize the items using the status and level attributes that each item has. Then we'll briefly review ways to help clean up your items, how to do some housekeeping within each project to help reduce clutter and stay focused on the most important things. Then we will look at Rollbar and how we fit into the DevOps process. And from there, we'll build on that into ways to automate this process, how you can start to seamlessly integrate Rollbar with less manual effort required to get the results you need. All right, so first off, terminology. It helps to know the things that we're talking about. And as we build on those terms, it'll be important to understand those. So once the SDK is installed into your code, that's when Rollbar begins reporting. Each individual event that is sent is going to be called an occurrence. So typically, you don't deal with occurrence investigation on a regular basis. It's usually reserved for deep dives because every occurrence of an error is not distinctly important to us. And for that reason, we group them into items. So the grouping engine, which is one of our foundational components, which intelligently categorizes these by the root cause of the problem, that's going to help improve the user experience here. If we were just combing through occurrences, that would not be that much different from a logging service. Grouping is really the intelligent piece that transforms Rollbar from just ingesting messages into something that's intelligently identifying code problems. So items are usually the most granular piece of material in Rollbar that we care to manage and to change its state and manipulate. So when we look at the base UI and stuff, we usually focus on the items menu, and that's definitely going to be the case today. All right, so now let's talk about the status and the level of an item. So I will run through these slides and then we'll take a quick jump over to the UI just to make sure everyone's aware how we can change these and where you can find them and how to filter on these as well. So the three statuses that we have in Rollbar, we have active, resolved, and muted. And each of these has sort of a designated purpose within the Rollbar lifecycle. So we'll talk through those. Active is where your items are going to default. For all new items, they show up in an active state. So semantically, when an item is active, that means it is something that we need to address. We need to make code changes to fix it, and we do want to continue to see it as a part of our event stream. We want to see that as a part of our list. We want to know when certain alert events happen about these active items. So if an item is marked as resolved and then it appears again, then that's also going to reactivate it, which switches it back into the active state. So the base process for identifying a rollbar issue and then fixing the code is to take that item from its active status and then to resolve it. And so once it's marked as resolved, that's where we consider it to be fixed. So that does not mean that we're losing visibility on that. We're still going to ingest any events that occur for that item, but it's not going to appear on our dashboard because we have marked this as being fixed. It no longer requires manual effort. If it does reappear, that's when we see the switch back to active where it gets reactivated. And usually there's a separate notification rule for reactivated items. And that's one you definitely want to monitor because it means that something has resurfaced when you believe that it was already resolved. So those are the sort of the two main states, I would say. And then the muted status, this one is sort of a special purpose where you are declaring this item to be probably noisy, but also not important. So muting it is not going to, it doesn't designate this as finished. It's just deprioritizing it. So it's moved away from your dashboard. You no longer see that on your active list. And there are going to be no notifications triggered about a muted item. So it's not going to ever get back into the active state on its own. And so that's something I noticed recently where I think a few customers have let a couple of muted items just kind of sit there. They were muted and then they weren't maintained or they weren't reassessed. So just to speak on item discipline for a second, I would say that if you do plan to use the mute fashion here to send those items into the muted status, make sure that you're doing a periodic cleanup of those. If you don't plan to fix it at all, then maybe you should just catch that exception on the code side, which prevents Rollbar from reporting it. We only report uncaught errors and exceptions. So in cases where you may not be able to stop a problem, if it's just going to persist due to maybe a package concern that's outside of your control or for whatever reason, then the way that you would sort of suppress that and not have to pay for it would be to catch that code side. All three of these statuses do count for billing purposes. So muting is more of a convenience function. It's not going to help reduce your item ingest. And that's where it can get dangerous, where a muted item may send a high volume and eat into your monthly occurrence billing. So just keep that in mind if muted items are something that you expect to use along the way. Do a periodic cleanup of those to see if there's something that is causing problems with your ingest. All right, so next up we have severity levels. Just a couple of slides on these. We're not going to step through all five. The severity levels are more used for prioritizing your items. So there are 5 and they are considered ordinal. So critical is considered the top and then debug is considered the lowest. And with that, when we store it in our internal database, in the RQL database that you can query for analytics, that's where it really does have an ordinal mapping. So critical will be saved as 50 in the database, error as 40, warning is 30, info is 20, and debug as 10. So there are some expressions that you can use in the Rollbar UI that allow you to do a greater than for the level, where I could say something is greater than or equal to the info level, and that would capture these 4 because they're all considered to be greater than or equal to that value. So these are log levels. These 5, we didn't just make them up. That's sort of the standard for logging. But you don't have to think of these as being typecast to the log level, which is reported. They can be instead manipulated and used as a more subjective prioritization system. So it doesn't have to be a crash or a critical event to mark it as critical. If it's something that's always going to be of high importance to you, then that's, semantically, that is a critical event and you would want to mark it as such. So levels can be changed in the UI. I think that's the place that most people do it. You can actually manipulate the the code to send an event with a different level, and that's only going to be respected in the case that it's the first event of an item. If you do make a change in the UI, then whatever the item is set to have its level, that will persist. If the code tries to send something as a warning, but you've already marked it as an error in your UI, then it's not going to change there. So it's sort of giving the human edits the ultimate superseding power there, and then the others are based on if they've been changed or not. So typically we see that folks do it in the UI, and you can actually also do this in the Slack notifications that you get. So if we have time, we'll look at that as well. All right, so just to show off these features, so this is my items menu. By default, it's going to show, I think the filters for brand new logins are just having the top 2 levels shown here, but I have manually marked all of mine. So you can see here in the filters that all 5 levels are showing up, but I can manipulate this. It's a great way to quickly filter these. So most of the things I've sent into this account are at the error level, but after I unmark that, we can see here's some info level events, and then there's a critical event as well. So visibility selector there, and then by default, the status is only going to show active. You can select all, and over here, we can see now that there's one that's marked as resolved here. So there's that green checkbox. And I don't believe I have any muted items currently, but if I wanted to mute one, I could go here and mute that. And so then any new messages that come in aren't going to trigger alerts, and it's not going to show up on my active items list. This is actually an event that I'm going to use for my LaunchDarkly stuff, though, so I better unmute that. Otherwise, my demo won't work. So glad we cleared that up. We'll get to that LaunchDarkly demo towards the end of the presentation. All right, so up next we have item cleanup. So there's a few things that you can do to help resolve these items and to declutter along the way. So we'll look at a few different ways of doing this. Just in general, these ways to clean these up are also going to help reduce manual effort from others. So if other folks aren't having to investigate and then manually to mark on these. All right, so you have the ability to resolve via commit messages when you're sending new commits to your version control. You can add a tag with a rollbar item identifier to say this is a specific item in the rollbar system that is being fixed by this commit. And so that will auto resolve the item when that commit is built into the new code version, when the deployment is made there. So that's a good way to prevent an older version of that code from reactivating the item. We can do that with resolve via commit, and you can resolve in version using the UI as well. So here's what an example of one of those messages would look like. So as you push the commit, if you want to send in a message, you can specifically target that. The rollbar item counter, the number that you see in each rollbar project, that is the value that you fill in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was the example value for that command. All right, and then resolve inversion, mentioned that a second ago. That's where you can specify that a problem has been fixed in a given code version. And that will also help to prevent older versions from reactivating that item. This is mostly helpful for folks that have different versions of their application being used. With the Android OS fragmenting problems that occur in mobile, I think that points to an obvious scenario of where you may have a lot of different versions being used by your end users. And since with a given version or a given commit, since you know that the problem has been resolved from that point forward, then as those occurrences continue to get reported by the older versions of code, they're not going to trigger alerts. They're not going to reactivate the item, because what we're saying at that point is once these end users are on the right version of the code, then they will no longer experience this error. So that's sort of declaring it as a user problem and not necessarily a code problem. All right, and then we have the auto resolve feature. So we'll show all of these in a second. I'll step back over into the web app. So this is a nice one for housekeeping purposes, where you can prevent your item list from growing unnecessarily large and from having stagnant items. This is, in my mind, this is kind of a way of saying that you're only going to focus on the most recent and the most impactful items, or as I like to say, what have you done to me lately? Which of these items are causing the biggest problems for me and which are causing the most immediate problems? So the way to help clean up that list with no effort is to auto resolve all of those stale items that are not actively sending every few seconds or often enough to bubble to the top of the list. And you can do that either through the onDeploy method, or you can just choose a time window, sort of an expiration range for items in a given environment. So looking at this, we'll look at the resolve inversion feature and the other stuff as well. So just quickly looking at the resolve feature, this is on the item details menu. The resolve button has this drop down next to it. And here I can add the version here. So in most cases, if you're using the Git-based version control, there's some sort of hash value that can go in there, the hexadecimal number that's generated by the commit or the deploy. And then some folks are also using just numeric versions. Both will work. It is going to make sure that it checks the right order. So if I did this version and then something got sent in from 0.13.4, then it's not going to reactivate that. So there's resolve inversion. Resolve via commit, since we push that through the Git messages, that would be done in the command line. It's a little clunky for me to do that with my current Git setup. So we'll just trust that the Git command works. It does. I have used it before. So just got my demo environment in a little bit of a rusty state currently. All right, so up next, Rollbar items and DevOps process. I think I'm just going to enlarge the slides here since I'm jumping back and forth. It's a little clunky, so we'll just use this mostly full screen view. So issue tracking systems are common, and Rollbar really begins to find a place in your DevOps lifecycle when you introduce the issue tracking system and make that integration complete. And there are two ways that you can choose to do that. I think most folks will start out with the first method and then gradually build confidence towards the second. So the first method involves you connecting to your issue tracker and then choosing to create tickets and to link them manually. So I think the project that I had looked at before and some stuff I had set up. So looking at one of my other demo projects here, this CC test is not defined error that's coming through. There's a button here to create a JIRA issue for that. So in this case, I think I broke my integration when I was messing with some stuff. So we'll look at one of the other ones. But just showing this on the JIRA board here. So the JavaScript project is where I do have them automatically connecting. And so looking back at the items here, if I go to the JavaScript project, we can see here that it is a view JIRA issue. So again, I think something I messed up with my credentials there. I'll have to double check. But when we look here, we can map these to the issues that we've got. So here in JavaScript, we can see a number of these that have come in. So with that, we're sort of taking out the manual investigation step. We're no longer required to investigate and then declare that this is a ticket and then fill all of that in. And on the JIRA side, we're also going to get helpful context sent over from Rollbar to JIRA. So here I can see the item details with the link to that page. And I can also see the stack trace that's shown in the Rollbar item. So Let's go to this link and we'll verify that it is sending the same info. We're basically just looking at the coordinates here, the line numbers, validate first name, validate form. And then here, of course, we see that as well. And since I've connected my source control integration here, that's why I'm also able to see this full code context. That does not get ported over to Jira. That would be a Jira GitHub integration there, but that would be one of the things that you lose on the Jira side, but you still do have reference to that rollbar item, and you can make changes to the state of these that will correspond across both of those. So marking something as done should make that change. We'll see if that's been affected by this integration. So item 56, I marked it done here. And it has been resolved in Rollbar. So seeing that connection, this connection from Jira back to Rollbar, this was made by adding the Rollbar for Jira connection to the app marketplace. So by default, that is not going to work, but you have to add that app as a part of your Jira domain. That's searchable on the Jira marketplace. Don't remember if this works for the marketplace. We'll find out. Sometimes I just have to be fully transparent about the things I demo because I'm not sure if they'll work. But adding this from the Jira marketplace, if we go to search for that, then we can configure that. Let's see, here we are. And again, that's necessary for the flow from Jira back to Rollbar. But in order to get Rollbar to create Jira issues, you do not have to do this. But here, there's the Rollbar for Jira app. You can see that it's been added here. So again, just to speak on the sort of the process of getting to the automatic ticket creation and having faith in that, making sure that grouping is sufficient for your use case. That's a big part of making the leap to the automatic ticket creation. If you're seeing duplicate items in your Rollbar web app, then that's going to cause duplicate tickets. And most of those problems are resolved by making sure that your grouping engine is up to date, especially with the new machine learning powered grouping engine that we now have. So if you have concerns about that, check the upgrade grouping menu under your project settings and see if there are any newer versions that need to be enabled there. All right, and now let's talk about the road forward with automation and the things that we're currently able to do and where we would like to be in the future. So this is related directly to item management, but also with sort of an overarching theme of DevOps process. So we've used this chart before. It's one that I've seen for a while since I started here at Rollbar, and it basically helps to illustrate the benefit of having a very powerful grouping engine. So with grouping being the thing that we're working to improve over time, we want it to have less noise, to point to better singular root causes without burying multiple problems under a single grouped item. And as that has improved over time, we now get to the point where we can start to automate the process of making code changes based on items that have been reported. And specifically, the demo that I'm going to show to illustrate that is the LaunchDarkly integration. So that's where you can maybe say that we're beginning to arrive at self-healing software, where we can ship code that has two different versions or maybe multiple versions of a feature. We can expose all of them to small subsets of our user base, and based on the automated response from Rollbar logging problems or reporting those errors from the different divergent features that we're trying, we can have LaunchDarkly then populate all of those pages. It can then target all the end users with the correct version of the code. So that was a very complicated way to introduce LaunchDarkly as a service. It's a feature flagging tool, and it basically allows you to send in multiple versions of a feature, and then that flag will determine which one is used. And that can be based off something like the Rollbar items. So looking at just some of the capabilities here, we're taking the different flags. In the demo that I'll show, I'm basically taking a broken button and I'm hiding that button as a result of a rollbar error. So that's where we sort of see the kill switch being built in. And since we're doing our best to tie these rollbar items to a given feature flag, that helps to further tighten the loop in this DevOps process, where those that go back to improve the features and to reevaluate the flag settings, they will have more information to do so. And then with things like the A/B testing and progressive delivery, that kind of rolls in with what I mentioned prior, where you can expose both of those to different groups. And based on things like performance, user experience, number of errors reported, you can choose which of the different paths is going to work better for the given deployment. And sort of the value behind all of this with LaunchDarkly is that you're not being forced to send out new deployments and things. All of the features, they live in the shipped version of code, but you're just sort of diverting the train tracks to the different station where you can find the features that are actually going to work. And so just to illustrate this before I move over to the demo, I think the demo will probably do a better job, but we can sort of see this as an A/B testing or sort of a canary delivery of something. So with a new feature that's maybe being pointed to for that subset of users with the flag, we can let those beta users experience this new feature. And if we do find that it's laden with bugs, that there are problems, it didn't work as expected, or maybe it's something that's not just problem related, but it could be something like it's a lot slower than we thought. It's not breaking, but this is not where Rollbar would necessarily collect that information, but I think that's where LaunchDarkly has helped elsewhere. Specific to what we do is we trigger these based off of errors. All right, and so now let's investigate that. So here I have this web page, and currently it doesn't look all that exciting. There's no button on here because I haven't exposed it yet. So looking over here at LaunchDarkly, I have this feature flag for this Say Hello button. So this is the one that will expose the code that I need to test. So I add a comment on why I'm enabling this. Then I type in the environment name to make the change. So I save, and now it says targeting is on. It's near instantaneous that it makes these changes, which I think speaks to the quality of their product. But now by refreshing this page, the feature flag state has changed, targeting is on, and my button is exposed. So this is the Say Hello button. And that's the LaunchDarkly configuration. The button and the page that I'm running here that shows the button behavior changes based on the flag. Then to correspond to that, we have the rollbar configuration. So I have a separate project set up specifically to do this. It's called LD demo. And this is the item that I have to test against. In this case, I need this item to be in a resolved state. And that is due to the fact that this notification rule is going to only trigger for new and reactivated items. So if I were to run this right now, I actually made this mistake in a previous demo where I pressed the button and nothing changed. It's because the item was already in the active status, so new occurrences of those were not being considered for triggering that notification. And here to look at the notification rule settings. So in order to connect to my project and to my LaunchDarkly account, I provide the credentials here for that. And then I configured this rule. And this is telling it what project, what feature flag, what environment. And then based off this notification triggering, I want to turn the targeting behavior off. It was on, that I had changed it here. And in this case, I also added a filter where it has to have a method that contains the phrase say hello in it. So as a part of the code that was built, that was something I added. So as I check this method, the one specific to the say hello button, I don't want other errors to disable my flag. So I specifically tell it only for the say hello method. All right, now let's give it a shot. So this method has intentionally messed up code in it. When I press this, it's going to throw an error. We'll see that in the Chrome console here. So clicking that, uncaught reference error, get message is not defined. So right away, I can reload the page to see the button is gone. And when I look in LaunchDarkly to confirm that this matches the targeting settings, now targeting is off. And the feature flag has a history tab here. Here's where I turned it on 3 minutes ago with the comment. And then 17 seconds ago, when I triggered that occurrence, the feature flag change was made due to this reactivated rollbar occurrence. And it even points me all the way down to the occurrence ID, even though what I'm really looking at here is the item. So refreshing this, it's now going to be in the reactivated state, which I can see here. It's active. And the last occurrence came in recently. If I wanted to view that, here's the occurrence URL, the one that was sent to LaunchDarkly. We don't normally investigate at this level, but if for some reason we need to, we have all of this data available as well. So that's sort of the most automated way we have of managing items right now. This doesn't necessarily resolve the item as a part of that workflow, but we are building the items and their appearances and their states into the code changes that we make and ultimately into the features that are served to our end users. So for that reason, I thought to mention that as a part of this workflow where we are talking more about item management, but this is a way to leverage items to assist with other parts of your process. All right, and with that, let's see if there are any open questions. I don't think I see any in the chat. So if anybody does have any, feel free to drop a note in now. There are resources posted in the chat. Question from Cesar, is Rollbar compatible with Clubhouse? Off the top of my head, I believe the answer is yes, but I have a bad habit of giving wrong answers sometimes. So let's just double check. We use Clubhouse internally, so I believe we do have support for that, but just to show sort of the flow through the UI. So at the project level settings, we configure notifications and we have all of our little badges here. So yep, Clubhouse is one of the supported issue tracking systems. For issue tracking, we have Jira, Trello, Clubhouse, GitHub issues, Bitbucket issues. Those are the main ones that I'm familiar with. And I think Sprintly may be a part of that workflow as well. So number of different issue tracking systems. Jira is the one that most folks use, but we do want to be flexible. All right, any other questions? And next question about Git actions. So I may need a little more clarification on that. We do support from the Git side when you're reporting your deploys and things. I know we have Git action support on there. Let me see if this helps, going to the docs page where I believe I've seen this before. We'll see if we can find it together since this is more or less just parking lot time. All right, what's it on the page? I thought. Yeah, we may not have support for this. Oh, here we go. I thought I saw that. Yeah, so here's a GitHub link. So I'm going to paste this in as my reply. Hopefully that helps. It made the question disappear. So if you need any more context or if this didn't answer, then just let me know. But with this is specific, I think, to the deploys where as you send things, when you're making those changes in Git, that it makes it over to Rollbar. If there's a separate system for GitHub taking action based off of Rollbar events, that may be something where you could use a generic webhook. So outside of our support for all these services that are sort of bundled, you can also send them to just any webhook receiving URL. So for testing purposes, there's webhook.site. And here you can just test a webhook connection. If I wanted to sandbox one right now, then I could paste this in and send those across. Let's actually just do that with the test notification really quick. So this looking at the generic webhooks. And these are interesting because they actually send the full payload. So unlike the other events that get processed and sent out of Rollbar, these are sending more data. There's going to be more text involved. So let's see, I may have to enable that. I know it is enabled. Sometimes this webhook.site takes a little bit to respond. If you did need to take action based off of a Rollbar event, I think Zapier is a service that's built for that, where you can take a webhook event and then based off that process it into something else. So that's where the customization really falls outside of the Rollbar domain. As a solutions engineer, I love to help build and deliver things like this. The workarounds that are required to meet the business objectives. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, feel free to shoot those across as well. All right, and I don't think there are any more questions streaming in currently. So thanks everyone for joining. I think we have some feedback forms that will go out with a follow-up. But watch for the session recording. We'll get that published and everything. But thanks everyone for your time and have a great day.